Clemson's run in the NCAA tournament has finally come to an end. And after kind of sitting on it, being sad for a while, I think it's time to appreciate this team. So we'll talk a little bit about their run and their season and where it stands. And then let's talk about Coach Brad Brownell. The fan base was very divided on him prior to the season. This was kind of a payoff season. It certainly paid off. And so where does he stand now, and what has he earned an extension? We're going to get into all of that. But let's start off with this team and what they accomplished. Obviously, it was a team that had a chance to be a top 4 seed in the ACC and still finished in the top half, finishing 6th in the ACC standings. So historically, that's pretty good to be in the top half of the ACC. That might change a little bit moving forward as the ACC weakens itself by adding 3 teams that are not as good at football or basketball. But in this iteration of the ACC, I think being in the top half is quite good. They make the NCAA tournament, which obviously hasn't been done a whole lot at Clemson. Unfortunately, they flame out quickly in the ACC tournament with the first round loss in Washington, D.C. to Boston College. So, and they had already secured the NCAA tournament bid, really based largely on a few great wins, but in the ACC play, but largely an elite non-conference performance. So they were locked in, but it still didn't feel great. Felt like they were limping in, and then they were actually underdogs to the 11-seeded New Mexico Lobos. And a loss there, you're not going to fire someone after making the NCAA tournament, but it sure felt like a little bit of a failure or a disappointment, especially after the great start this team had. But Clemson came out and they blew the doors off of New Mexico, took a commanding lead early, and it was really never in doubt. They looked like the much better team. That loss to Boston College was probably a blessing in disguise, and Coach Brownell admitted that it allowed him to really kind of get through to his team and coach them really hard, and they responded really well, obviously. But after that, it was Baylor, and they were a top 5 offense coming in, elite 3-point shooting offense, moved the ball well. And you could tell during the game, their raw talent was at another level. They were extremely talented. They had freshmen doing all sorts of things that freshmen just don't do at Clemson. And we'll talk about this on the flip side in a minute, but as basketball goes, there's an element of luck. Right? Are you making your threes that night? Are they making their threes that night? And Baylor was just a little bit off. And that was enough for Clemson to really control the game. Baylor made a great run to tie it. But Clemson then in the final moments just took over the game. And they knocked off the 3-seed Baylor. But up next was Arizona. Clemson had beaten a 3-seed before, never a high major 3-seed. They beat BYU in their I believe that was the 1980 run. But they never beat a 2-seed. And Arizona was top 10 on offense and defense. And it was pretty evident in that game. Their defense was better. Clemson got off to a early lead, pretty strong lead. But then towards the end of that half, Arizona went to a full court press and really turned the intensity up and actually came all the way back and took a lead. Seemed like Clemson would fold. But down the stretch, despite every call going against them, 12 straight free throws were the only points Arizona scored in a 10-minute span. Clemson's defense just shut them down. They made clutch plays. And that was a game, one of the first times I've ever really noticed Clemson and Coach Brownell really, really outcoached Tommy Lloyd in Arizona. There was quite a few set plays, 3 out-of-bounds plays, 2 or 3 just normal set plays where Clemson just got easy layups. Jack Clark had an easy layup. PJ Hall had a couple. Joe Girard had a beautiful little kind of orbit play, got an open look. And it was, I think, one of his best, maybe his best ever game that he coached. It was I saw a coach who maybe 10 years ago struggled to get his team to inbound the ball successfully at all. I remember losses, one in particular to Pittsburgh, where Clemson just couldn't inbound the ball. And now they're getting easy baskets out of set plays off of the inbounds. I thought it showed the growth over the 14 years that Brownell's been here as a coach and how he's become a much better coach. And I think a very good coach for Clemson. So after that, they were fortunate in the 1-seed loss to Alabama. RJ Davis for UNC just had a cold shooting night, and that's sometimes what it comes down to. They lost to Alabama, so instead of facing a 1-seed, Clemson would get a 4-seed. I thought, Alabama's not as good as Arizona or Baylor. Unfortunately, it was Alabama's night. Clemson did a few things wrong, and really 3 things. They didn't shoot the 3 well. They shot 30.8%. They were 8 for 26, most of those coming late. Not terrible, but below their average. big thing was they missed a lot of free throws. They shot 500. They were 50%. They were 8 for 16 from the free throw line, including missing the front end of a 1-and-1 late. So it's almost like 8 for 17 with a front end of a 1-and-1 miss. So that really killed them. Final score was a 7-point spread, 89-82, but that's because of free throws. I think you could really say it was about a 5-point game. Jack Clark also missed the front end of a 1-and-1. That wasn't a 1-and-1. He missed both of them. So those are in there, but those really kill you. Alabama shot 44.4% from three. They were 16 for 36. They got hot from three, and that's how basketball goes. And so that was unfortunate. They made their free throws not at a great clip, 68.2%, 15 for 22. But that's enough for 5 points there on free throws alone. And then they out-rebounded Clemson 44-33. Besides those things, I thought Clemson outplayed them. Clemson was able to get the ball in the post. They had a great game plan. And they were able to score in the post. I thought Shefflin was great. Hall was a little inconsistent, but great. Gerard got off the slow start, was phenomenal in the second half. RJ Godfrey was outstanding. Really excited about his development, but at the end, you're not going to make your free throws. You're not going to make your threes, and another team gets hot, you're going to lose. And so that's how Clemson goes down. But in the grand scheme of Clemson basketball, this is the most fun run I've ever got to experience. The 2018 run was awesome. I wasn't around in 1980 for that Elite Eight run. Obviously, 1990 may be the only year that I think they could rival this year because they won the ACC regular season championship and had a Sweet 16 run. But I think you'd argue this is easily top three, probably top two, and maybe the greatest season in Clemson basketball history. So before I dive into that, let me tell you about our sponsor. It is The Recipe Man. It's the first book in the Kingdom of the Infinity Realm series. It's a fantasy adventure book that follows a young man with MS as he stumbles into a strange new world where he's mistaken for a military officer and has to play the part to survive. It's really well done. It's fast-paced. I read it, helped edit it, and enjoyed it. It's available on Amazon. The authors are originally from South Carolina. So help out some local authors. Check them out. I'll have the Amazon link and their website in the video description. Definitely give them a look. We appreciate them supporting us in this channel. And speaking of, if you would like to support this channel, you can also subscribe and like this video. It helps out a lot. All right, so let's dive in a little deeper. So I skipped the first couple of years of Coach Brownell's tenure. The years shown below are years of the NCAA tournament. So where you see 2014, that's the 2013/14 season. And you see it's not a perfectly linear line, right? It's not starting from the bottom and shooting up, but you see the trend lines going up. And I excluded those early years because he took over and he made the NCAA tournament, won a playing game against UAB and lost in the first round. That was with like Tanner Smith and a lot of Purnell's talent. So I don't want to give him too much credit for that. And then there was sort of a rebuild as he was totally reshaping the roster and figuring things out, going from a full court press to a much slower paced team. And so they had some bad years. So I excluded those to give us a more fair look. But you see the win percentage is clearly trending up, including this year. But, win percentage is variable or affected by the quality of opponents you play. For example, last year they played extremely soft non-conference, which boosts their win percentage. Whereas this year they played an extremely tough non-conference. So considering the win percentage the same isn't quite fair. This year was obviously a much better team than last year, and their ACC schedule was tougher just by the draw they got. So let's look at KenPom. And you can see the last 2 years, you can see how it pulls out the difference there. Last year's team, 68 in KenPom because they played a weaker schedule. This year, 19, much stronger schedule. And of course, a great run in the NCAA tournament boosts that. But here again, you see the orange trend line going across is up. It's not skyrocketing, but it's steadily improving. And I think that should give you confidence for this program under Coach Brownell. Yes, it's been slower than we want. It's been a long haul to get the program to an Elite Eight. I mean, it's been since 1980, right? And he took over the 2010, 2011 season. But you do see it trending up. And I think that is reason to feel good. Now, here is the context. This is a big zoom out. Let's look at some context. Now, here you see, and I've grouped them by coaching era, and you can see the purple shading there should help you see that. But you don't see, you see a lot of years with no bars, right? Those are years where they did not appear in the NCAA tournament. Gray bars is the game they lost in the tournament. Obviously, they've never won the national championship, so there's always a gray bar if they made it. And then NCAA win is in orange, right? So you see 1980 and you see 2024 having 3 wins and a loss, 2 best tournament appearances ever. I would say this one is clearly better because the path was just so much harder. Not just because there were 6 seed in both of them, but first time it was Utah State, BYU, and Lamar. So no were the wins, no like high major brand name blue bloods. Whereas this year after New Mexico, it was Baylor, and then Arizona, and then an Alabama team that paid a lot of money to get this good at basketball. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think when you look at these, you see that Coach Brownell, yes, there are a lot of years where there's no bars and you want to see bars, but I think you see it trending in the right direction. You see comparable to other tenures. It's as good or better. And, obviously we're going to have to build on this. We can't go, 5 years, 4 years without a tournament again. That's not acceptable, or we'll be right back to where we were prior to this year. But I think you're seeing that he's as good or better than all the previous coaching tenures. Tough to compare to Barnes because it was so short, very successful, but so short. But the other thing to consider is a guy like Rick Barnes isn't going to stay at Clemson, where it's a football first school, and he had that success and he bolted to a bigger program in Texas. So Brownell is committed to Clemson, and I think Clemson needs to commit to him. There's 2 years left, so they'll probably extend him, and I think he deserves it. And here are some comps. So I included the teams that Clemson played in the NCAA tournament. Baylor's private, so I couldn't find it, but I think an even better comp would be South Carolina, so I put them in there. See Brownell starting next year, if the contract remains as it is, will make $3 million, which is more than Richard Pitino, who he beat at New Mexico. Of course, ACC coaches shouldn't necessarily, you'd expect them to make a lot more than Mountain West coaches. But at South Carolina, you see they're paying Lamont Paris $4.33 million. Arizona's Tommy Lloyd is in the 5.25 to 6 range. And Nate Oates, his contract escalates throughout the duration, and I'm sure he'll get an even bigger raise now. But you can see that's going to go over $7.5 million towards the end of the contract. And that's the thing with the SEC teams. They make all that money on football. They reinvest it in basketball. Really gives schools like Alabama a chance to become elite. And that's what you are when you're in the Final Four, right? They wouldn't have never done that had they not invested and hired Nate Oates. I think for Clemson, they'll extend Coach Brownell. I'd be shocked if they didn't. He certainly deserves it. I would expect something in the neighborhood of Lamont Paris's 4.33. And then we'll need to see, not necessarily this consistently. I don't think you expect a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 run every 2-3 years. But I do think you expect to make the tournament about half the time and to win a game about half of those times, and make a run every 5-6 years like this, or maybe a Sweet 16 only. Again, these runs are not random, but there is an element of luck. Alabama got hot, Baylor didn't, right? If you flip that, Clemson loses to Baylor. So that's where there's a little bit of randomness, and you don't want to put too much stock into one run. But I think what Brad Brownell has done and getting this team and coaching so well throughout the tournament. And the last thing I really want to harp on is the culture of the team. We talk about this a lot with Coach Sweeney and Clemson football, and deservingly so, and how he's a good Christian man who makes kids better people, better husbands, and they're good kids who don't get in trouble. And we need to talk that way about Clemson basketball, because it's really quite similar. You saw the camaraderie. You saw some of Joe Girard's comments. He came in as a transfer and saying stuff like Clemson's a second home to him now. Brownell's like another father figure to him now. That's what we want beyond just winning. And we care about it a ton for football. And we're proud of it for football. And I'm proud of it for basketball too. And as a Tiger fan, I think you should be too. So if you were on the fence, like so many of us, including myself, before the season about Coach Brownell, I hope this season and this success has you firmly in his camp supporting Clemson basketball and supporting him, because I think that's where this is headed. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you enjoyed the Final Four run. Happy Easter to those who celebrate. And as always, go Tigers.